Welcome to today's video in which I want to show you how to set up your INSTAR 2K Plus camera to work with a Wi-Fi that has WPA2 or WPA3 Enterprise Encryption. As of today, INSTAR cameras are one of the only cameras that support WPA Enterprise Encryption for Wi-Fi. Now, for sure, a LAN connection is always preferable before a Wi-Fi connection. But if you do have to make a Wi-Fi connection for whatever purpose or for whatever reason, then enterprise encryption is surely better than a normal WPA2 or WPA3 encryption. Now, what you have to do is open your web interface of your INSTAR camera. There we go to settings here on the top left, and then we go to network and Wi-Fi. Now, what I will show you today is how to set up the Wi-Fi Enterprise with a Synology RADIUS server and an OpenWRT router. There's multiple routers that support the Wi-Fi Enterprise, but not every router does. So first you have to make sure that your router supports this kind of encryption, and then you will also need a RADIUS server that is used to authenticate yourself. Now in our case we use a Synology NAS with the RADIUS server, but there's also open source RADIUS servers or paid versions of that. Now, first of all, we go to the Wi-Fi menu. As I've already opened, we search for networks, and now you will see a list of Wi-Fi networks. And here we have, for example, this test box. This is a normal WAP2, WPA3 network. So let's say a normal household Wi-Fi network, which we can select. And here we would have to input a password and have to confirm this password. The whole authentication process will be happening between the router and the camera. What's different is if we are using WPA2 or WPA3 Enterprise encryption. This is, for example, this one here. Then you can already see on the right side, Enterprise will be selected. And here we have a username and a password. Now the way it works is that the camera first, like it will say, I want to authenticate myself. Then the router will say, okay, here is the RADIUS, the address of the RADIUS server. Please authenticate yourself there. Then it will check with the RADIUS server if the username and the password is correct. And if that is then the case, then the router will allow this connection to be happening. And in our case, what we have here, we have a router that is an OpenWRT. This is like an open source software for routers. And with this one, we can set the enterprise encryption. Now here we go to our network, like our Wi-Fi interface. I have already opened this one here. And then I just want to show you here shortly that once we go to edit, in our case we're using the 5 GHz network, then here on wireless and security, we have the option to select W2 EAP or W3 EAP. We could also select specifically WPA3 EAP, which the camera also supports. But for most purposes, it's better to use WPA2 and WPA3 because not every end device might support WPA3 Enterprise. So once you selected your encryption here, then next we have to input the IP address of our RADIUS server. In our case, this will be the Synology RADIUS server. So this is the IP address here that we input from the Synology RADIUS server. The port is usually for a RADIUS server 1812. You might change that inside the RADIUS server, and then you would also have to adjust it here inside the router. And last but not least, we have an authentication secret. This secret will be set inside the RADIUS server. It's just an authentication that will be used for the router and the radio server to communicate between each other. And next I will open the Synology. Here we have the RADIUS server. Now the RADIUS server is a package that comes or that is available for your NAS. You can just go to the package center here and then search for RADIUS server or just RADIUS. Then you should already see the package. And once you have it installed, you will then see down here this logo with the 2 keys. And I have already opened this one here. So we have a few settings that can be done here. For example, the port can be set. By default, it's 1812. And here we can also say which users are allowed to use the authentication. In our case, we are using the local users from the Synology. So later for the Wi-Fi authentication, I shortly go back here to the camera. Here we see the username, which in my case is Aaron, and then we have the password. So this is the user and the password that is set inside the Synology to authenticate myself for using the Wi-Fi. Next we can go here on the left side to the client list. Now the client list is not the client like let's say the camera, but the client in this case is the router. So we have to add a client, which is in our case the router, and then we have to input the IP address from which the client is sending. So this is the IP address of that router that I'm using, and then also we have to set the secret there. Now I'm just adding one, so you can see here we can give it a name. Let's say we call it router. Then we have the shared secret. Now that is, if I go back here to the router, this is here the authentication secret. It's a password to communicate between the radio server and the router. So this one you have to set here, and then you set the IP address of the router, so no other IP can use this kind of communication. Let's say you have a router working on IP 10 instead of 9, then this one will not work like in our case here, because we only the 2.9 will be allowed to make the communication with the radio server. Now additionally you have a block list here. You could block some users, and then we have also a log where we can see if the authentication has worked or not. So then this is actually all that has to be done inside the Synology. Once you have input everything here to our router's settings and you have applied it, then the router will like show the Wi-Fi as an EAP network as we have it here. And if now you input the correct username and password, then you can do a test, and if everything is correct, if that's the correct username and password, then that should be shown as all okay, like it here. And then we can apply the settings, then take the network cable off. Like in my case, I still have a network cable connected. And then once we take the network cable off, the camera will be connected to Wi-Fi, which uses then the encrypted enterprise, like encrypted enterprise encryption, which is WPA3 in our case, or as a fallback it can use WPA2. I hope this helped with the settings. If you have any questions, please write it in the comments. Otherwise, I hope you liked the video, and I'm happy to see you in the next tutorial video. Thanks for watching, and I wish you a nice day.